It's Farm Mom with another installment on Rabbit to Shawl, part 3 of the series. Last time I showed you how I make the punis for a more controlled method of spinning with the pure Angora fiber. So today we're going to spin with the punis that we previously made. So let me just adjust the camera here so that you can see what I'm doing with my hands, and we'll get on with that. So here are the punis that we've made, and so they fairly closely resemble pencil roving in their size, but instead of the fibers being aligned lengthwise, they do go round and round. So while they will be straightened out to some extent, it will be more of a woolen style spinning. Now, for those who aren't already experienced spinners, you may find that the most important aspect of spinning, of hand spinning, is your drafting. Your drafting technique controls how thick or thin your yarn is, how smooth it is, and the various effects you can get. The difficulty that some new spinners run into is that you're trying to maintain your spin, whether that be the foot treadle on a spinning wheel, or whether that be stopping to rotate your drop spindle every minute or so. That's a lot of coordination. So some new spinners like to start with maybe an e-spinner or something where they just learn the drafting first, and the e-spinner takes care of the rotation for you. But that you can do it. It is definitely something that you can do. So with the punis, some people like to pre-draft, which just means that you're kind of stretching them out a little bit, loosening them up, so that you don't have quite as much work to do. I find that ends up getting to be a lot of loose wiggliness in my hand. So I normally don't pre-draft a lot for myself, but I will say that sometimes I do, just not very often. So we're going to get going here with the spinner. This is a Reeves wheel. It was a Christmas gift a couple of years ago from my brother. He found it and did some repairs on it and sent it to me. So I know a lot of people say, oh, what a nice brother. And yes, I'm very thankful for this. So I've just started the new piece into my already spun yarn. And so let me take that apart and show what I did again. So what I do is I kind of relax the spin on a little bit of the yarn that I already have started here. And then you just kind of overlap almost perpendicular to your spin with your first little bit of fluff that you've pulled out of the end of your puni here. And you kind of go perpendicular. You get your twist started, and then that just sort of goes right along in there with what you've already have. And then you get to the end of your original piece that was spun. So now I'm all onto the new puni. And so what I'm doing, I'm not going to keep treadling while I'm showing, but normally I would just continue to treadle and draft all at the same time. But I'm going to pull this out to where I have a nice even thickness. And then this part of the yarn, up to where my fingers have pinched it, has a fair amount of extra twist. And so then I'm going to let go of that first finger, and everything between where my finger was and here now has twist in it. So I continue with the treadle, and I draft, and I release that first finger, and then I repinch, and I'm drafting, and I release. So this becomes very automatic and very smooth. You can end up with some little knots, and if you don't like those, if you don't want little knobbies, you can kind of go back and just kind of pluck that out, stick it to the couch there, and pick it up later. So we're drafting and spinning, and the amount of twist on a spinning wheel can be controlled to some extent by how you have your drive band run and in which part of the pulley it sits, because most of the newer spinning wheels have a couple of different options. So if you have a tendency to run your foot a little fast, you go ahead and set your drive band into the slightly looser part of the pulley on your spinning head, and that will allow you to not be overspinning your yarn too much. Now I am planning on plying this. This is what it would be called a single, and I will ply 3 of these singles to create a 3-stranded yarn. So one of the other things is that I will mention that when we are spinning singles to ply, and in most spinning, you want your wheel or your rotation of your drop spindle to go clockwise. And then when you ply, you go counterclockwise. So I'm going to spin just a little more so you can watch the drafting as I'm drafting along here. And then I'll switch so you can see what I mean by the clockwise rotation in case that's not entirely clear. Now here you see that I have different areas. This back part of my spool is getting a little full, so I'm going to move that to the next one forward and fill up this next space a little more. So there's another one of those little spots that didn't twist in good. So I'm just going to kind of coax that out of there. And that'll all smooth down and be a nice thin strand. I have a tendency with the Angora to run these 2 fingers along the yarn, whereas with wool I quite often will jump my finger back and forth like I was showing you originally, but I have this tendency to run it between these 2 because that helps lay down some of the extra fluff and guard hairs initially. Eventually, that is one of the characteristics of your Angora yarn that you kind of want to come out. They talk about the bloom or the halo on the Angora yarn, but right now I want it all nice and tight and spun in there. So I run these 2 fingers up along the yarn even as I release with my pinchy fingers to put that spin in there. And I find this to be very calming. It's really very soothing. It becomes very ingrained and automatic even when I have to stop and pick out a little blob that I don't want in there. It's just very calming and very soothing to sit here and spin, and very satisfying to see the end result when it's an animal that you have cared for and raised, and then harvested the wool from, either, you know, shearing if it's a sheep, or through the natural grooming process with the Angora bunnies, of, you know, the saving all the combfuls of hair when they start blowing their coat. And it's just really satisfying to see that end result of the finished yarn, which we're getting very close to on this project. Okay, so there's another one of those little knots. If there's already some knots in the wool when you harvest it from the bunnies, the cards do not take those knots out. So as you're making the ponies, or otherwise using your cards and preparing your fiber for spinning, when you see those knots, it's best to just pick them out, because carding more is not going to necessarily get those out without some additional picking at them. And of course, the best way with the Angoras to avoid the knots is very regular grooming, weekly with brushes. A lot of people like to use the livestock blowers on them every few days, and that does save some time. That is not a luxury that I have been able to afford yet for my rabbitry. I do hope to eventually get a blower to be able to get more of the bunnies groomed each day when I'm working with them, because the hand brushing does take a lot more time than blowing them. And if once they have mats, of course those have to be dealt with by hand, but keeping them well brushed once you have them nice and clean is definitely the better way to go, and keeps the coat nice so that you end up with the really nice fiber from brushing your bunnies. We do always have a few extra bunnies that would be available for fiber pets. If anyone is in the Midwest and interested in getting an Angora bunny, you can always contact us through the Gmail for this channel, or through our Etsy store, which is also Around the Farm Crafts. And I am spinning this single very thin. This is not necessarily, if you are a beginner spinner, you're not going to want to start out spinning this thin. You might not even, if you're truly a beginner spinner, you may not even want to start out trying to spin Angora as your first attempt. When I first started spinning, I started with Shetland, which I find Shetland wool to be very, very easy to spin. My next favorite was the fine merino and the medium merino wool. And so I learned to do, you know, my drafting and spinning initially with those before I moved on to learning to spin the Angora. The Angora is a little bit harder than those soft wools. So if you're really, really a beginner, I would recommend starting out with some wool first, And then if you really like the idea of the Angora, maybe even consider getting some Angora fiber from someone and spinning it before you decide to invest in an Angora fiber pet. You know, make sure, actually with any type of fiber animal, I recommend that you try the wool first. I always used to think that because I already had dairy goats, that when I started spinning, maybe I would want to get a mohair goat or, you know, one of the breeds of goats that gives spinnable wool. And I went to a class where we were doing a lot of different types of breed studies and trying spinning different types of heritage breed wool, including some of the different types of goat wool, and found out very quickly that while it's not bad to spin, I did find the goat wool to still be much more scratchy than I would ever want to wear against my skin. I have very sensitive skin, so I am only able to wear some of the finer wools, like the fine merino and some of the finer Shetlands. As far as when I talk about fine, I mean the lower micron counts on the size of the fiber, and then also some of the breeds have more of a scratchiness factor than others based on how much the wool has, you know, that it's, I can't remember the exact name, but they have cuticles. Some of them have cuticles that stick up more than others. So on those scratchier type of wools that, you know, originally were used for some of the outer garments, like your tweed coats and things like that, those breeds certainly have their place and they have their job within the textile industry. But I just wouldn't choose to spin them or keep those animals for myself, since I know that I am really not able to wear those. But the Angora and the fine merino, I don't have a problem with, that I don't find it to be itchy. And I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, well, I'm allergic to Angora, or I'm allergic to animals, so I probably can't wear the Angora wool or be around it. And I think to some extent that is going to be a factor of how well the yarn, final yarn, has been washed. Angora wool cannot be washed before you spin it. So possibly if someone is allergic, they wouldn't be able to spin it. But once the yarn is finished, then you go through the process of setting the twist and washing the yarn. The dander that is on the wool from the animal should all be washed away. So that should help alleviate actual allergy problems. But, you know, different people have different skin, and so I'm not going to say it's not possible to be allergic after they've been washed well. Garments that are made from the natural hand-spun fibers quite often need special care. So, you know, for very small babies, young children, you might want to rethink using some of these specialty yarns for baby gifts and things, because that, even though they're soft and they're wonderful and they're going to feel great against that baby's skin, they're going to be extra work for that new mom. And she may not have the time to be hand washing and hand drying that baby bonnet or that baby blanket that can't be put in the washer and dryer. So quite often for baby gifts, your natural fibers are not the way to go. So there, I just found a knot. I may have created that myself, sort of by the way I was pulling up here at the end. So I'm going to do a new join, which means I relax the twist in this little bit of yarn, and then I just add in and let that pull those fibers in. I'm just getting right down to the end here of the pony that we've been working on. And that was about 1 gram of fiber in that pony. We got several feet of new single strand out of that. And I go ahead and I spin all the way to the end. And then when I'm done, I let the spinning wheel come to a rest and finish off by hooking around my little knob here on the front, and then it'll be ready to go the next time. So I'm going to change the camera again and have finish up with the wheel and showing it spinning clockwise.